This Late Night Linux Family podcast is made possible by our patrons. Go to latenightlinux.com/support for details of how you can join them. Support us on Patreon for access to ad-free episodes and early releases. That's latenightlinux.com/support. Hello and welcome to episode 121 of Linux After Dark. I'm Joe.
I'm Chris.
I'm Gary.
And I'm May.
Welcome back all. Gary and I have just got back from OggCamp, hence our slightly groggy voices. And before we get going, I want to say a huge thanks to Joss, who emailed us after we talked about the laptops thing and me wanting to upgrade. After hearing that conversation, Joss emailed to say, do you want this Asus ROG Zephyrus or whatever it's called, a huge gaming laptop? And of course I said yes. And we were kind of working out how to meet up. And I said, well, I'm going to OggCamp, want to meet there. And we did. And now I've got this huge gaming laptop, which is really cool. Lovely bright screen, pretty decent speakers, 1080p crucially, 16 gigs of RAM, I think, and it's a very nice laptop. It uses a fair bit of juice, but what you expect, it's got a 1080 in it, I think. So a reasonable graphics card, and an 8th gen i7.
It's the H series i7.
Yeah, which means it's like very powerful in both senses of the word. So it is quite a beast of a laptop.
I quite enjoyed that they had to put the palm rest above the keyboard in order to put vents in it for the GPU.
Yeah, but it does come with a rubber palm rest as well, so that's pretty cool. But anyway, thank you very much. And also thank you to whoever dumped what they said was a 2011 MacBook Air, an 11-inch, on the swaps table. I had the inside track on that. Someone from the crew said, someone's just put this on the swaps table, and I literally ran and got it. And then turned it on, and it turned out to be a 2014 with 8 gigs of RAM. So it's actually a really usable little machine. So if you're listening, thank you very much.
I quite enjoyed that Joe came back to the cupboard that we were running the live stream from, literally panting with this MacBook Air in his hand.
Your stack of laptops is now a tower, Joe.
Yeah, basically, yes. I just can't say no to a free laptop. What can I do? But anyway, with us going to OggCamp, I thought it might be interesting to talk about how we get back to our own networks while we're away and why and what we do with them. I ended up not getting back to my network anywhere near as much as I thought I would because I was too busy getting drunk and talking to people. But May, you've got some upcoming travel. So are you planning to VPN back?
I've got Tailscale on everything that I really care about. I think we've talked about this before for C-File and Image. I have those behind a Tailscale proxy that just cfile.mytailnet.net. So that's just on my iPhone, and I'm just able to get to them wherever I am. It doesn't really matter.
And didn't you mention you have SSL and everything bound up with that? What was that tool you and Gary both use for that?
Yeah, through TSD proxy.
Do you not find it kills your battery running Tailscale all the time, though?
On my iPhone?
Yeah.
Well, I switched from a 13 mini to a 15 Pro, so yes.
Yes, but the battery was big enough for you to not care.
Yeah, and it was about time, I guess, because 4 gigs of RAM apparently just isn't enough for an iPhone anymore.
See, I have Tailscale always on my new iPhone, which is a 17E. I can't say I've really noticed that it's that much of a battery hog, so long as I have the exit note feature disabled.
Right.
Which for getting back to Image and Nextcloud and stuff like that is generally fine, because that's always connected. And then if I'm on a public Wi-Fi, I just turn the exit node on.
I literally turn a full tunnel for everything on every time I leave my house on my phone. A WireGuard tunnel. Literally tunnels all traffic home, because my home connection is faster than any connection that I have on the road. So when I used to have asymmetric internet connections at home, I would only do what you've said. I would tunnel DNS or subnets just to get back to home. But now literally everything is sent back except if I'm on restrictive Wi-Fi that starts like deep packet inspection and everything just breaks. I really should look into something like Automate, because I wish it just did it without my intervention.
Oh, right. So you just manually do it every time you leave the house?
Every time habit, yeah. I turn Wi-Fi off and turn the WireGuard tunnel on, full tunnel back to my house.
You can tell Chris lives in a city where connectivity is pretty solid, because any time that I've tried that, If I get somewhere where the connectivity is spotty or the phone thinks it has 4G and it doesn't, the network stack just gets into a complete mess on both iOS and Android, and I have to reboot.
Right.
Like, it just stops passing traffic.
Now, I've talked before about how I'm too thick to work out how to do WireGuard. So I tried to do this with Tailscale, and it worked. I set up an exit node at home and can connect back to it no problem. But even if I've got like really good 5G where it's like nearly 100 megabit or whatever, I'm getting like, I don't know, 20 max. Is that just because Tailscale is just not as efficient as WireGuard, or what? Or am I doing it wrong?
It's the same, isn't it? I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Gary or May. I don't have a rooted Android phone, so the kernel modules for WireGuard are not present. Therefore, I'm using user space WireGuard because the only way to get the kernel modules is to root your phone and run a custom kernel. Tailscale is just the same thing, right?
Tailscale, my understanding, is it's using user space WireGuard on the exit node. So that might be what you're seeing. I certainly notice that the machines I'm running Tailscale on, if I do a large file transfer, it starts eating CPU very quickly.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Right. Because I've got gigabit down and 100-ish up. So that is definitely not the bottleneck. The bottleneck is Tailscale. And I thought that it might be the fact that it was on Pi 5, which is pretty beefy, but I thought I wanted something fairly low power, and a Pi 5 seemed like a good shout for this, right? But then I thought, I've got an old C720 Chromebook, because I know that ARM is just a bit weird sometimes, so let me try it with that. And it was just exactly the same. And network routing doesn't need a lot of CPU, right? Like, you don't need some modern i5 or i7 to do this.
If you're doing the encryption on the fly, it's probably more intensive than you'd think.
Ah.
But if you remember some time ago, when I used to have that 128 megabyte VPS, OpenVZ, very old, very, very, very weakly spec'd. When I got faster internet, I did A/B testing through the VPS and then through my home connection. And it was to do with the connecting client. And as long as the connecting client had enough beef, yes, if, like you said, if you do sustained high throughput and heavy transfers, you start to notice it. But the server, as you say, it's not really a server, but let's call it that for the sake of clarity, isn't as important as the connecting client necessarily most of the time. I've certainly not noticed it. My endpoint is a 1.4 gigahertz dual core ARM router. So it's not super powerful.
And does that have the hardware accelerated encryption though? Because I'm just thinking maybe that's the problem here.
Good question. I mean, it's a MediaTek SoC and it's the same as the OpenWRT1 and it's very well supported. But I've just never even thought about these things. You'd have to start doing in-depth testing. It's a bit like when you had your Wi-Fi troubles.
Yeah.
Maybe you'd start to lose patience.
Maybe I should try it with a more modern CPU that's got all the encryption hardware acceleration built into it.
Maybe just run an exit node on your desktop next time you're out and see what happens. The other thing that you could be seeing is it relaying the traffic via one of Tailscale's nodes.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
So you can test that if you do a Tailscale status on a box while you're connected, and that will show you if it's connected by one of their relay servers or not. That will limit performance quite significantly. However, the only way that you can get around that is to forward a specific port to the exit node so that you can get to it from the outside directly.
Right. Well, I haven't done that. The whole point of using Tailscale for me is I don't need to piss about with opening ports.
You don't necessarily need to, but depending on what firewall you've got and how it's doing NAT, etc., it can mean that it will have to relay the traffic.
It sounds like that's probably the problem then.
So due to the hybrid nature of my home network, I have several different solutions depending on what is getting back to my home network. So the box I have in OVH runs a pfSense VM that has a WireGuard tunnel back to my home network. And the WireGuard endpoint is just the built-in one on the Unify gateway. I then have a Unified travel router, which connects via Unify's proprietary VPN, I think it's called Teleport, back to the home router. And that works pretty reliably as well. It just kind of handles all the key exchange and everything by fact that I'm signed into the same Unify account. And then on all of my devices, laptops, servers, etc., I have Tailscale, and I've got various ACLs and things in place for what devices can access what services. So that stops me from my laptop being able to hit a backup endpoint or something like that. So it keeps those nice and isolated.
Yeah, how do you do that, Chris? Because Tailscale makes it really easy with it's like JSON or whatever, like simple rules that you write in there. But how do you do it with WireGuard? Is it similar?
Well, because I do it very much with NF tables in my router, because it's all OpenWRT. So there's an interface set up for WireGuard, and then I have firewall and routing rules on the router itself because it's running on the router. So it's very like get under the car bonnet and twist the nuts and bolts, but it's working okay for me. The appeal of something like Tailscale Netbird, one of those other things, is that I could make this easier. But then every so often Gary will say that he's having MTU issues or something like that.
What's MTU issues?
So MTU is the maximum transmission unit. So it's basically the size of the packets that are being sent across the network. So for most things, a 1500 MTU is pretty standard and will be fine. But it's if you're doing file transfers at like 10 gig, then you can get into trouble where you need slightly larger frames or slightly larger packets.
Also, connections like PPoE have an overhead, and you have to do this thing called NSS clamping. So when I used to run my IT business, I would often deploy Unify equipment, and then I would have to make sure on some connections that the MTU was adjusted to allow that overhead. Otherwise, the connection would become incredibly spotty and drop packets a lot. So I'm very much of the opinion that my setup, whilst primitive, is working very well for me. And A, I don't want to be dealing with those headaches. And B, I don't want Tailscale to suddenly go, the free tier is reduced.
Yeah, see, at this point, I'm super locked into it because no client can talk to any other client on the local network in my house. So everything has to go via Tailscale.
I'd grumble a bunch, but I'd figure it out.
Yeah, I could make it work. I could go and spin up Nebula or Netbird or one of the others. But the reality is at this point that I have client device isolation turned on all of the Wi-Fi networks. The servers all live in their own tiny networks, depending on what their role is. So you're not getting to anything should you just happen to get a port on my switch or connect to the Wi-Fi.
So you're saying that you can't, for example, talk to a Jellyfin server from your phone then without using Tailscale?
Not without using Tailscale. I also can't talk to the Jellyfin server from the Plex server or the image server from the monitoring server without going over a VPN, because otherwise the NACLs would be completely useless because I could just go to the LAN IP.
That sounds like you've massively overcomplicated your LAN to me.
I have micro-segmented everything. Yes, you're correct. I would just suggest that you don't do what I do for your home LAN. It's probably a little bit overkill.
Well, it sounds like for a home lab where you're trying to learn that kind of stuff, that would be good. But for like home prod where I want to, I've got an iPad, a new iPad, I want to be able to just start watching Jellyfin on it, like without having to piss around adding rules for it in Tailscale. That just sounds like your ACL list must be massive then.
No, my ACL list is very small because everything is defined as a tagged role. So I have a role for iPad or tablet. I have a role for phone. I have a role for my workstations versus my wife's laptop, etc. So I join the device to the tailnet, I go to the Tailscale dashboard, and I tag it. And that's it. Then it gets access to all the things that a tablet should have access to, which is, for example, not my jump box that I do all of my sysadmining from. But my laptop can have access to that.
See, in my mind, you've done individual rules, but
It's rule sets, that you apply.
Yeah, that's what I should be doing. Right.
Yeah. So I have a rule set which basically says my laptop can have access to the jump box or all of the applications that are shared by TSD proxy. The jump box can have SSH access to all of the servers, but the servers cannot have SSH access to each other. So there are probably 30 or 40 rule sets, but that's not that much.
Okay,
I don't have a problem.
Yeah, it's like my tower of laptops. It's definitely not a problem. So what about ad blocking then? Up until not that long ago, a few weeks ago, I had just relied on my phone on AdGuard public DNS. And that was the thing that actually allowed me to move to a stock ROM on a Pixel. And that, I think, was your suggestion, Chris. And it's worked reasonably well, but it's a bit limiting. There's a few domains that I'd like to allow list, which I just can't do with that because it's just a blanket, like whatever. And there's some ads that sneak through, actually.
Originally, if we go back far enough, the WireGuard tunnel to home was not to tunnel all traffic when I had asymmetric VDSL, because I would stymie myself to 20 meg, if I was lucky, shared bandwidth for anything connected to that tunnel. So it was mainly to connect to Pi-hole, and also I use custom DNS in Pi-hole to resolve internal Let's Encrypt certed subdomains that are only accessible internally, and it enabled me to use Pi-hole DNS for that. So it just tied it all together. So I wasn't using a tailnet or anything like that. I was just getting auto-renewing with traffic initially, which I wish I'd stuck with because professionally it would have been useful to. But I got lazy and switched to Caddy, which is much, much less of a headache to configure and maintain. But if I want to go towards Kubernetes, which I do, I wish I'd stuck with traffic because it's more useful for that.
Well, I decided that it would be funny to install Pi-hole on a Raspberry Pi 1 and see if I can actually use it. And it turns out that you actually can. The interface is actually fine, and the actual DNS stuff, I mean, that was designed so long ago that a Pi 1 is like fast compared to the computers they had back then doing it, right? So that part's fine. It's only when I have to SSH in and update it and stuff that it's really painful. So it's actually been fine. And I'm wondering, like, the best way to use that while I'm out of the house. Because at the moment, while I'm in the house, I turn off private DNS in Android. So I turn off the AdGuard DNS, and then it just defaults to the Pi-hole. And then when I go out, I have to remember to turn AdGuard DNS back on. But sometimes I forget, and then I see a bunch of ads, and I'm like, and I have to change it. And more often I come back, forget to turn it off, and then see the few ads that slip through AdGuard but don't slip through Pi-hole. So I don't know what my best solution to that is.
You need a way to set your DNS and WireGuard and presumably Tailscale. I've not used it a lot like May and Gary have, but that's part of the configuration options for your client file. So it sets the DNS to my 2 Pi-holes. Now, the cherry on the cake, which I need to implement, which is on my to-do list, is Keep Alive D. So to have a VIP, a virtual IP, that actually fails over when one Pi-hole misses a heartbeat, because DNS with 2 DNS servers doesn't always, it should be redundant, but more frequently it's overly sticky. So one of those 2 Pi-holes is preferred, and then if it goes down, the devices don't always just pick up the second one magically. You start to get DNS failures actually. Whereas with Keep Alive D, you set a third IP that points to a primary, and if it misses a heartbeat, fails over elegantly to the secondary.
You see, all I've got is this Pi 1, and for some reason, my Anchor UPS, that's not really a UPS but can be used as a UPS, just decided to turn off the AC thing the other day. And so all my networking stuff just disappeared. So when I turned it back on, the ISP router and the router and switch and everything came back. And then I could get online on my laptops, but it just wouldn't work on my phone. I was like, why was my phone not working? And then it dawned on me, okay, that Pi hasn't booted yet. So yeah, I think I need more than one DNS server.
Also, you want to make it, to quote our good friend Jim Salter, you have to solve the problem in the best way, not the most technically gifted way, if you see what I mean. So you essentially need a way to, I like WireGuard with DNS servers defined. When I bring that tunnel up, I have 2 of them. And so I've never had a problem there. And I can always get back home. And if one of them goes down, then I can still access something that will reboot it. And then one of them runs as a container. And now one of them is, they're both containers actually, but one of them is now on Proxmox, which is a little bit easier. So You might want to set up Tailscale or keep using Tailscale and make sure the DNS is set. But yeah, you don't want it hanging off flaky power because the whole exercise is a headache when you're not at the house to sort that out.
Yeah, well, the UPS I powered back on and got everything back up. And I thought, right, I wonder if there's a firmware update. And there was, and it said bug fixes. I thought, well, that sounded like a bug to me that it turned it off. So I did a firmware update and then the fucking thing turned off again, obviously as part of the firmware update. So then I had to power everything back on again. So that was fun.
I feel like with anything networky like DNS or Tailscale exit nodes, you need multiple of those on different pieces of hardware with different power. Because if not, you are just so susceptible to this.
But the thing is, I don't want to have Tailscale running constantly on my phone is the bottom line, because I am just convinced it's going to kill my battery.
It's worth a try. If you're doing exit node, then probably. But if you're not, then it's only going to send things through Tailscale that are actually going to your tailnet.
Yeah, which will be DNS requests plus the stuff that you've got subnet routers for.
There is a third option that I have never used personally, but I know some people have, called Next DNS, which has a free tier of 300,000 queries a month. So the disadvantage with the AdGuard DNS is it's their opinionated block listing. One of the things I didn't mention about Pi-hole, which I also like, is, for example, I have stopped my Tapo cameras continuing to make DNS requests, even though they don't have WAN access, with a rule in Pi-hole. It double sinkholes because they just keep firing off DNS. And coincidentally, Gary, I managed to get an NTP redirect working with my firewall. So now they get local time from my router, finally, because for ages I couldn't work that out.
Yeah, the time sync on them was always a pain.
Yeah. So Next DNS, Joe, is like a cloud-hosted Pi-hole where you can set custom rules. And if you're only using it when you're out of the house, 300,000 queries a month might be enough. There is also, but it's only for your phone, I think. I don't know if they exist anymore because I have used them before I found the AdGuard public. There used to be a couple of apps for Android that would create a dummy VPN interface because you can't edit the host file unless you root your Android. But it creates a dummy VPN interface that redirects DNS like WireGuard would back to your phone so that you can then edit the block lists for the DNS and have control. The interesting thing is that some bad firmware, shall we say, like the Xiaomi phones, they really don't like that because it's blocking their revenue model, essentially, which is sell hardware cheap, sell your data to recoup the cost.
Yeah.
So they, interestingly, will aggressively kill those in the background for supposedly battery-saving features. But DNS 888 or something, I can't remember what they're called because I haven't used them for a while, but that would only be on your phone, of course.
I remember like firewalling apps that do something similar, but just like for the entire network connection for a given app.
But I do like the Pi-hole stats and everything and how easy the interface is and everything. So I think that's what I need to do then, is not run Tailscale as an exit node, but just connect back to my LAN and maybe have a couple of boxes then.
Yeah, I would just stick it on any boxes you've already got on. Stick it on your NAS and a Raspberry Pi or something.
Yeah.
If you already have Docker on a machine, you could run it in Docker, you could run it in LXC. You don't necessarily have to have two dedicated pieces of hardware just for the Pi-hole.
Yeah.
But you do want it, as Gary said, two physically redundant devices, ideally taking their power from separate sources.
But I saw this Pi 1 in my drawer and I thought, I want to do something useful with this. It cannot just be e-waste. And I really didn't expect Pi-hole to work with it, but on my LAN, it's been absolutely brilliant. And it's only the fact that I can't connect back to it. But I think Pi-hole plus Tailscale on it might be a little bit too much. So I'm probably going to have to use that Pi 5 for it.
I find it remarkable how hard you all try for this.
Well, I don't try particularly hard at all.
What are you talking about?
Yeah, your rule sets, yeah, which I thought you were going to say you've got 5 of, but then you're like 30 plus or whatever. That's trying pretty hard.
Well, I meant for ad blocking specifically. I don't try that hard. I redirect the DNS requests to the gateway, which is a Unify gateway, and I just tick the ad blocking button on the Unify gateway, which seems to work remarkably well for stuff on the phone. And then the desktops all have uBlock installed in Firefox, so I don't notice it there.
Yeah, that's what I do. Just any desktop, Firefox, uBlock Origin, job done.
Yeah, I think the killer feature is the roaming ad blocking for me. That's what I was up for.
I use WBlock on my iPhone, and I use Ad Nauseam in any desktop browser. The thing for me is, I didn't actually get an ad blocker to strictly block ads on my phone. I wanted to block the Associated Press and Reddit because I kept obsessively checking them. And that worked pretty well. But it also means that in order to view them, I need to turn off the ad blocker, which means all the ads come through, which makes them incredibly annoying to use, so I stop using them.
Good thinking.
But I think that's kind of my philosophy on anything that isn't those. Like, if I'm using an app that has ads in it or something, it's probably not somewhere that I actually want to be all that bad. So having the annoyance is a good thing because it gets me off of it.
Right, that sounds like a fairly good approach. Right, well, we better get out of here then. We'll be back in a couple of weeks, but until then, I've been Joe.
I've been Chris.
I've been Gary.
You all work way too hard for your home networks.
See you later.